أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والعصمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والعبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الرذبية والجود التقوية والنقابة النقبية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه أما بعد فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجعلناهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا لما صبروا وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The famous Islamic historiographer Muhammad al-Shahristani, within his famous book Kitab al-Milal wal-Nihal, the Book of Nations and Creeds, says أعظم الخلاف بين الأمة خلاف الإمامة, that the greatest point of dispute within the Ummah of Rasulullah was that dispute in regards to the position of Imamah. You find that each group came forth and they discussed what is the realm of imamat, what is the establishment of imamat, and more importantly, who are the beholders of the position of imamat. Some came forth and said that imamat was strictly a political office. Others came forth and said no, it was strictly a religious institution. A third group came forth and said, no, it was a combination. Another group said that an imam must be somebody who has a revolution and rises with a sword. You find from all of these different views and opinions and much more, it goes to show that the discussion pertaining to the status of imamat is something which was discussed since the earliest time period within the Islamic society. And you find that many of these discussions made their way into the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And one of those theories of imamat, which I'll critique and refute upon this night, is that view which said al-a'imma al-ulama al-abrar, that the imams of Ahlul Bayt were simply just righteous scholars and the most honorable and the most knowledgeable of their time period. That they were not divinely chosen by Allah, And the reason we follow the Imams of Ahlul Bayt was simply because they were the best narrators of the traditions of Rasulullah. And this discussion, although it may be academic in nature, this discussion is of fundamental importance. Because in today's time period, although these ideas have been refuted by our ulama, many of the proponents of this view are beginning to spread these views within the English language. And upon this night, I felt it was my responsibility that as others are spreading doubt and suspicion about the status of the Imams, one upon the pulpit should sit and show what the true message and the true nature of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam is. You see, the individual who propagated this theory was an individual by the name of Mohsen Kadibar. Mohsen Kadibar, after studying in Qom and gaining his license of ijtihad under Ayatollah Muntaziri, moves to America and teaches at Duke University. Now, I won't mention who influenced Mohsen Kadibar and who is influenced by Mohsen Kadibar, but to summarize his idea, which is an incorrect understanding, Mohsen Kadibar says that when you look amongst the Shia, there are two understandings of imamat which is prevalent. He says number one is what he calls al-qira'atu sa'ida, or he calls the view of the Imams having divine qualities. He says this common view today, which is the majority opinion, is symbolized by number one, the Imams being believed to have been designated by Allah an-Nas. Number two, the Imams are infallible in their actions, in their thoughts, having al-ismatul mutlaqa. And number three, the knowledge of the Imams is ladunni and given by Allah, and it is not acquired. Mohsen Kadibar says that this view is something, although it was there amongst the time of the Imams, it was not the common opinion amongst the companions of Ahlul Bayt, and this is something which only became common after the 5th century, after the migration of Rasulullah. And in a lecture, it's important to come from the beginning to the end. I repeat again, that this is the view which I will critique and refute. This isn't the accurate view. But he says that this common view which believes in all of these different aspects of the Imam being designated by Allah, and the Imam having isma, and his knowledge being given by Allah, this view is the common view today, but it only came after the 5th century, which is an incorrect fact. But he says behind this was a second view. And he calls this second view al-qira'atul mansiya, the forgotten understanding of imamat. He says that in the first 5 centuries, the way the companions of the Imams understood the Imams is that the Imams were the most pious, they were the most knowledgeable, they were the best narrators of the Hadith of Rasulullah, but their nature was not different from our nature. That in other words, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, according to this man who held this view, is just a more knowledgeable Abu Hanifa. And Imam as-Sadiq is a more knowledgeable Ash-Shafi'i. And he is a more knowledgeable Malik bin Anas. We'll examine the arguments of this individual to say that this was the view of the companions and the early ulama, and see where does the truth lie. Does it lie with the common view which believes in nas and isma and ilm ladunni to the Imams? Or does it lie with that view that says the Imams were just pious scholars, they were ulama abrar? Now when you look at the evidences which this individual uses to prove his view, he says number one, when you look at the statements of the ulama, even the contemporary ulama testify that in the early time period, this doctrine of the Imam being chosen by Allah and the Imam being infallible was something disputed. This individual, He points to Allama Mamaqani, an 18th, 19th century scholar, in his famous book of Ilm al-Rijal called Tanqiyul Maqal, a book where he discusses the different biographies of those who narrated from Ahlul Bayt. And he says that within that book, under the entry upon Muhammad bin Sinan, Allama Mamaqani says over there that much of what we believe as a tenet of Tashayyo was considered to be amongst ghulu and an extremist belief. Now this claim, let's see if this claim has factual basis. Number one, when you look at actually what Allama Mamaqani says, Allama Mamaqani says that some of the early scholars, they discussed about the nature of the ilm of the Imam. Whether the ilm of the Imam was God-given or whether they would acquire it via study. They would discuss whether the Imams could forget. And they would discuss that did the Imams have ilmul ghaib. You see, theological positions develop over time. That when our prevalent view is what we hold today, 1400 years of scholarship and development are behind the view. But even over here, we reply to this individual, nowhere does Mamaqani doubt that the Imams are chosen by Allah, and he does not doubt the doctrine of Isma and infallibility. You see this individual claiming that this quote proves his point. I say, where in this quote does this scholar say that the Imams were not chosen by Allah? And where does he say that the Imams do not have isma and infallibility? And I know this is an academic discussion, I repeat it again. But if it wasn't of the utmost importance for us to understand it today, I wouldn't be having this discussion. At the second level, we see that this individual, within his work, he says, anyone who believes that the Imams have ilmul ghaib, and they believe that the Imams are chosen by Allah, and they believe that the Imams are infallible, these individuals are only taking from hadith which are weak hadith. Now, how do we reply to this individual? The first reply we give is that imamat is not only proven through the hadith only. Imamat is found within the Quran, and imamat is found within the aql and the rationale as well. You find the tenets of our faith can be proven through pure rationality. You see, our ulama, when they prove imamat, there is a rule called qa'idatul lutf, the rule of God's divine grace. And the same rationale to prove nabuwat is the same rationale to prove imamat. Then what does this rule say? It says that when Allah has sent mankind upon this earth, mankind aspires to have a nidam. They aspire to have something which is a function that will bring justice and equity. That God did not just create us and leave us to chaos. That we need to have a system. And our intellects are limited by the time we live in, by the place we live in, by the culture of our time, by the society of our time. Thus, we have to recognize that morality and this system must come from Allah. Those who deny objective morality, they say it is what societies decide. I say, which society has achieved justice without a divine system? Is there justice upon the earth today? Is there a system without corruption on the earth today? No, there's not a system like that. So this rule says that mankind has a need for rules. And when we have a need for rules, Allah recognizes this. And Allah has the ability to send us the law. And Allah did not create us in vain. He created us with wisdom. Thus, He sends us this law via a messenger. You see, rationale. That when we are created, we have to have a system. To have a system, God has to send it through someone. And at the second level, when Allah sends us the system, it can't just be given to us and we don't understand it. The person who gives the law, that individual must be an individual who, number one, preaches the law, number two, he explains it, number three, he protects it, and number four, he shows the application of it. You see, this is how the Imams of Ahlul Bayt with rationale would show the position of Imamat. You know, Hisham ibn al-Hakam, an individual who didn't believe in the Imams, comes to Hisham ibn al-Hakam. And he says to Hisham, "Oh Hisham, why do you believe in Ja'far as-Sadiq?" You know what Hisham says? Hisham says that when you see, what do you see with? He says, "I see with my eyes." And he says, when you hear, what do you hear with? He says, "I hear with my ears." And when you taste, he says, "I taste with my tongue. And I smell with my nose." And he says, is there any part of your body which processes all of these different senses? He says the heart is what processes. Now the heart in the metaphysical sense as that center of comprehension, not just this physical heart. He says that if your body cannot process this information without a central point, without a point where everything is processed, how can there be reality within this world without a center point known as the Imam? He says, in the way that your body has a qalb and a heart, the heart of this universe is the wali of Allah upon this earth. So you find this argument was made through rationale. Sayyid al-Murtada in Ash-Shafi fil Imamat uses this rule. And Shaykh al-Mufid in Kitab al-Insaf uses this rule. Hisham ibn al-Hakam mentions this rule. You see, we rationally proved Imamat. But after that, the question comes up to Isma and infallibility. You see, when you have proven the Imam is designated by Allah, then rationally you have proven the infallibility of the Imams as well. Why? Because Allah is saying, obey these individuals. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu atiyu Allah wa atiyu rasula wa ulil amri minkum. Fa in tanaza'tum fi shay'in farudduhu ila Allahi wa rasul. Allah says, O believers, obey Allah, His Prophet, and those who are ulil amr. I say that if Allah is saying obey these individuals, is there anywhere within the Quran Allah has said obey those who are sinning? Nowhere within the Quran Allah says obey those who are sinning. The fact that Allah says obey these individuals is proof that these individuals cannot sin. Because if they were sinning, then you would say, oh Allah, on one side you said obey them. On the other side you said stay away from sin. This is a rational contradiction. So the point I'm making is that Isma and the Imam being designated by Allah is not just something which is proven through the Hadith, but it is also proven through rationale and it's proven through the text of the Quran. When you come to the Quran, Allah in chapter 5 verse 55 says what? إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. That your wali is Allah, وَرَسُولُهُ, and His Prophet. And from amongst the believers, that believer who establishes prayer and gives away zakat while he's in a state of ruku. I say, is this a hadith which came after the 5th century, or is this the Quran? Is the Quran revealed after the 5th century, or is it revealed before? You see, this is the text of the Quran which all Muslims have agreed upon. Now when it comes to Isma, the Quran says, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. Then you find Allah is saying that, O Ahlul Bayt, no impurity can even come near you, O Ahlul Bayt. You know, some out of their hatred for Ahlul Bayt, when they translate this verse, they say remove impurities from them. To remove implies that it's within them. Allah is saying that these are those individuals that a rijs and impurity does not come towards them. You find that this is a Quranic proof for infallibility. When you come towards the Imams having God-given knowledge, how much evidence do we have in the Quran that when Amir al-Mu'mineen was asked, "Oh Ali, what is your favorite verse which was revealed about you?" You know, that Ali bin Abi Talib, who stated that over 300 verses were revealed about Amir al-Mu'mineen. They asked that Ali, "What is that favorite verse about you, O Amir al-Mu'mineen?" You know what the Imam says? The Imam says, it is that verse of the Quran that says, وَيَقُولُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَسْتَ مُرْسَلًا. That when the disbelievers say that you are not a prophet, O Rasulullah, قُلْ كَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكُمْ وَمَنْ إِنْدَهُ إِلْمُ الْكِتَابِ. That, O Prophet, say enough is a witness between us and you, except for the fact that Allah is the witness and the one who has been given knowledge of the entire book. You see, over here, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, the reason this is my favorite verse is because when it came to testifying to the messengerhood of Rasulullah, I was referred to next to Allah in that testimony. You know, that Amir al-Mu'mineen, this goes to show that the knowledge of the Imam was God-given. If the Quran says that Khidr has God-given knowledge, that وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّ إِلْمًا, that from us we gave him knowledge, what about those individuals at that doorstep that Khidr would go and learn from the children of that household? You know, the ilm of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, I remember an incident that a man comes up to Amir al-Mu'mineen and he says that all I have to do is disprove Ali and not do what he says will happen, and Ali's status will become clear to everyone. You know what that man does? He comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, "Oh Ali, tell me, what will I eat for dinner tonight?" Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "You'll eat rice pudding tonight." In our language, the Imam says, "You'll eat kheer tonight for dinner." You find that man, he says, very simple. All I have to do is not eat rice pudding and Ali will be wrong. You know what happens next? He goes to his house. He says to his wife, "What's for dinner?" The wife says, "Rice pudding." He thinks, ajib. So he says, "Okay, I won't eat from my house." He goes to his neighbor. He knocks on the door. He says, "What's for dinner? Can I join you? I don't have food." The neighbor says, "Yes, join, we have rice pudding." He thinks Ali bin Abi Talib. At that point, he sees a caravan coming into Medina from out of town. He goes to that caravan. He says to them that, "What do you have for dinner? I'm hungry." They say, "We have rice pudding." At that point, the man says, "I don't want to eat." The tradition says those people, they forced the man into eating because it was from their tradition that either they accuse him of poisoning the food or they say that he is not a person who is being honorable towards us. So you find that man, he says, what Ali bin Abi Talib says, it occurs. So you see, and you see, this is mentioned within our tradition. Go and read Mitam al-Baharani's Madinatul Ma'ajiz. Go and read Al-Kafi. Al-Kafi wasn't written after the 5th century. Al-Kafi was written before the 5th century. Shaykh al-Qulayni lives in Ghaybat al-Sughra within that time period. So you find that these are different replies to this individual, Mohsin Kadibar, and those were propagating his school of thought within the English language. But you find one more attack that these individuals bring forth, is they say if you look at the du'as of Ahlul Bayt, there is a contradiction between the du'as. I say to them, what do you mean there's a contradiction? They say on one side, when you look at Sahifat al-Sajjadiyah, and you look at Dua al-Kumayl, and you look at Dua al-Arafah, and you look at Dua Abu Hamza al-Tumali, you find that these du'as are God-centric. And you find these du'as only mention Allah. But on the other side, when you look at Dua Nudba, and you look at Dua Tawassul, and you look at Ziyarat Ashura, and you read Dua al-Qama, all of these du'as are referring to the status of the Imams and the praise of the Imams. This is a contradiction that these du'as are inauthentic and they came later. I say to these individuals that you need to re-examine Sahifatul Sajjadiyah. And you have to see, where does Imam Zainul Abidin mention wasila in Sahifatul Sajjadiyah, and how it's mentioned in Dua al-Arafah, and these du'as which you say are the only authentic ones and everything else is inauthentic. When you go to Sahifatul Sajjadiyah and you look at that dua which the Imam recites on the day of Arafah, Imam Zainul Abidin in that dua, after sending salawat upon Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt, he says, Allahumma salli ala awliyaihim, that, oh Allah, even send your blessings upon the lovers of Ahlul Bayt. Al-mu'tarifina bi maqamihim, those who acknowledge the status of Ahlul Bayt. Al-mutabba'ina manhajahum, those who follow the path of Ahlul Bayt. And then he says, Al-mutamassikina bi wilayatihim, those who hold the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. I say, if you say that this idea of the Imam being designated by Allah is not within the early du'as, Imam Zainul Abidin is referring to the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt within this dua. In another dua, Imam Zainul Abidin in dua 41 of Sahifatul Sajjadiyah, he says, Allahumma inni ataqarrabu ilayka bil Muhammadiyatir Rafiya وَالْعَلَوِيَّةِ الْبَيْدَى وَتَأَتَّوَجَّهُ إِلَيْكَ بِهِمَا, that, oh Allah, how do I seek nearness to you? I seek nearness to you through the Muhammadian elevation and through the Alawi illumination of light. And it is through these two, Muhammad and Ali, that I turn towards you, oh Allah. I say, even in Sahifatul Sajjadiyah, wasila is mentioned. Now we come to Dua al-Arafah. What does Sayyid al-Shuhada say in Dua al-Arafah? The Imam at one point in Dua al-Arafah says, فَإِنَّا, that, oh Allah, indeed we, نَتَوَجَّهُ إِلَيْكَ بِنَبِيِّكَ بِمُحَمَّدٍ نَبِيِّكَ, that we turn to you through your Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Alayhi wa ala alihi al-muntajabin, that send your salawat upon him and upon his chosen progeny. That if this idea of Ahlul Bayt being mansoos min Allah is not known from amongst the early Imams, then why is Imam Zainul Abidin over here saying that Ahlul Bayt are chosen by Allah? Muntajabin. We find in the dua of Imam Zainul Abidin that salawat al-Sha'baniyah. The Imam says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad shajarat al-nabuwa wa mawdi' al-risala wa mukhtalaf al-malaika. That you are those individuals, that you are the tree of messengership, and you are that spot where risala is taken. And you are those individuals that the angels, they visit you. This is found within an early text. And you find none symbolizes this idea like that individual who comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen. You see, when that man, he comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen, there was an individual. He was wearing very tattered clothing, old clothing, worn out clothing, because he saw that Amir al-Mu'mineen would wear worn out clothing. So he says to the Imam that, oh Imam, I've dressed like you. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, who said that you should do this? Allah has given you the bounties of this world for you to enjoy as long as they're permissible. After that he says, oh Ali, then why do you dress like this? You know what the Imam replies by saying? He says, Lastu ana ka antum. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I am not like you. that the reality of Amir al-Mu'mineen is different from your reality. Inna Allah farada ala Imam al-Adl, that Allah has made it mandatory upon those Imams of justice to feel the pain of the poor. So Ali bin Abi Talib dresses in this manner. You see, even from the earliest days, we find the idea of imamat is mentioned within the kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and it's mentioned within the kalam of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That when Sayyid al-Shuhada, he goes to the house of Walid bin Utbah in Medina, he says, Ayyuhal Amir, O leader of this area, O governor, Inna Ahlu Bayt al-Nabuwa, that we are the household of prophethood. Wa ma'dinur risala. You know what a ma'din is in Arabic? A ma'din is a mine. And into a mine, you go and get those gems from the mine. Imam al-Hussein says, we are the mine of risala. That if anyone wants that reality, they come to us, Ahlul Bayt. After that, he says, wa muhbitur rahmah, that it is upon us that the mercy of Allah descends. Bina fatahallahu wa bina yakhtim. It's with us that the religion of Islam opened, and it is with us, Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, that this religion finishes. You see, if the companions of the Imams didn't have this understanding, we wouldn't find companions like Habib ibn Madahir understanding the secrets of Ahlul Bayt. We wouldn't find somebody like Mitam al-Tammar who has ilmul balaya wal manaya, who had knowledge of the deaths of the people which he learned from Ali bin Abi Talib. You know, there's one hadith which says that one day Mitam is speaking to Habib, and Habib says to Mitam, "Oh Mitam, do you know a time will come that you will be killed as you recite the fadail and the virtues of your master Ali bin Abi Talib?" Habib says, "Oh Mitam, are you ready for such a day?" You know what Mitam replies by saying? Mitam says, "Oh Habib, are you ready for that day when an old man sacrifices himself for the grandson of Rasulullah?" You see, these companions, they understood the reality of Ahlul Bayt was not like the reality of anyone else within that society. And as you look at all of these companions, and those individuals who surrounded Sayyid al-Shuhada, you'll find that amongst those who had a unique status was Ali al-Akbar. I mentioned a few nights ago, it was only on the martyrdom of Ali Akbar that the Imam says, "Inna Allah istafa Adama wa Nuhan wa ala Ibrahim wa ala Imran ala al-alameen." That Allah has chosen Adam and Nuh and the progeny of Ibrahim and ala Imran. Ulama said that this line was the fadilat of Ali Akbar. That what status did Ali Akbar occupy? It's stated that there were two individuals in Medina, that from Banu Hashim, when they would walk in the streets of Medina, the people of Medina would stop to look at the beauty and the beauty from their face. You know who those two individuals were? It's stated one was Aba Fadl Abbas, the other was Ali Akbar. You know, what can I make you say to make you understand the masayib of Ali Akbar? I said a few nights ago, when a mother's son doesn't come home, that mother doesn't sleep. She stands by the door. She waits for her son to call. She doesn't have any rest in her heart. But I send my salam upon Layla. That how did Layla feel that moment when Ali Akbar went to ask permission from Layla? You know, on the day of Ashura, Ali Akbar is the one who gave the adhan upon that day. Ali Akbar wasn't the mu'addin of the army of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Al-Hajjaj bin Masruq was. But on that day, Sayyid al-Shuhada wanted Ali Akbar to call the adhan. You know, when a mother's child passes away, everything reminds that mother of her child. Everything will remind her of her son. But I say, how must have Layla felt in Medina after Ashura, that every time she heard the adhan of Salatul Fajr, perhaps she would remember Ali Akbar. You see, ulama, they say that only on the rarest of occasions recite the Masayib of Ali Akbar, because the followers of Ahlul Bayt can't handle the Masayib of Ali Akbar. You know, there's a story that there was a caravan going from Mazandaran in Iran towards Karbala. And they wanted to arrive in Karbala on a Friday night, on Laylatul Jummah. When they arrive in Karbala on that Thursday night, on Laylatul Jummah, the person who was the head of the caravan, Abbas Mazandarani, he says, I opened my book of Musiba and Masayib. And when I opened that book, it was the Masayib and the tragedy of Ali Akbar. He says that in the Haram of Hussein, as I was reciting the Masayib of Ali Akbar, everyone in the Haram of Sayyid al-Shuhada began to cry. He says, that night I went to sleep. And when I went to sleep, I saw Sayyid al-Shuhada. I said to him, oh master, why have you come to me? The Imam says, oh Abbas Mazandarani, the first reason I came is that anyone who does my ziyarah, I visit them. The second reason I came is that when you go to your town, give my salam to one of my Shia. Abbas Mazandarani says, who is the Shia? Everyone comes to you, but you give your salam to him? You know what Sayyid al-Shuhada says? Sayyid al-Shuhada says, this is my lover, that whenever there's a majlis in my name, he fixes the shoes at that majlis. But then he says, oh Abbas Mazandarani, that on Friday night, never recite the Masayib of Ali Akbar within my haram. He says that, did I recite anything wrong? The Imam says, you didn't recite anything wrong. But on Friday night, the soul of my mother Fatima, it comes. She can handle everyone's Masayib. She can't handle the Masayib of Ali Akbar. She says, oh Hussein, how did you lift the body of your young son, Hussein? That how did the father lift the body of his son? You know, when Ali Akbar fell to the ground, the Maqatil say, Sayyid al-Shuhada did something at the body of Akbar that he doesn't do anywhere else. An old father at the body of his young son. You know what the Imam does? The Imam placed his cheek on the cheek. The Imam placed his cheek on the cheek of Ali Akbar. The day of Ashura came. When the day of Ashura came, the first from Banu Hashim to be martyred was Ali Akbar. Because this was the test for Sayyid al-Shuhada. When On and Muhammad would come, Sayyid al-Shuhada would stop them. When Qasim would come, Sayyid al-Shuhada would stop them. When Abbas would ask, Sayyid al-Shuhada would stop them. But when Ali Akbar comes to Sayyid al-Shuhada, the Imam says, Taqaddam yabna ya waladi. That, oh my son, go towards the battlefield. But oh my son, make sure you bid farewell to your aunt Zainab, Allah Akbar. Because it is Zainab who raised you, Ali Akbar. You know what the writers of the Maqatil, they say? Humayd bin Muslim, he says, that when Ali Akbar goes to the tent of the women, I would see that the curtain of the tent would open, then the curtain curtain would close, it would open, it would close. Every time Akbar wants to leave, each of the women would pull Ali Akbar back towards the tent. But Hamid bin Muslim says, as I was looking towards Ali Akbar, I saw somebody was grabbing the bottom of the shirt of Ali Akbar. I thought to myself, if it was somebody older, they would grab the shoulder of Ali Akbar. That who is it grabbing the shirt of Ali Akbar? Hamid bin Muslim says, as I looked closer, I saw it was a young girl. It was the daughter of Hussein. She would say, Irham ghurbatana ya Ali Akbar. Oh Akbar, have mercy upon our ghurba, oh Akbar. Akbar comes out of the tent. Imam al-Hussein gives permission to Ali Akbar, but the Imam says, oh Akbar, as long as you are fighting, turn around so your father can see your face, oh Ali Akbar. Akbar gets upon his horse. He begins to go towards the Maqtal. As he's going towards the Maqtal, he hears footsteps behind him. When Akbar turns around, he sees a father. He sees his father, Sayyid al-Shuhada. The Akbar says, oh my father, you had given me permission. The Imam says, oh Akbar, you are not Sahib Awlad, oh Akbar. Oh Akbar, you don't know what it's like for a father, oh Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar goes towards the battlefield. As Ali Akbar is fighting, I don't have energy to recite. As Ali Akbar is fighting, the Maqatil, they say, فَلَمَّا بَرَزَ لِلْقِتَالِ. When Ali Akbar is fighting, وَقَفَ الْحُسَيْنَ عَلَى نَشَزٍ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. That Hussein would go to an elevated place. يَنْظُرْ إِلَى وَلَدِهِ. Hussein would look towards Ali Akbar. وَلَيْلَ جَلَسَتْ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ تَنْظُرُ إِلَى وَجْهِ الْحُسَيْنِ. As Hussein would look towards Ali Akbar, Layla would look at the face of Hussein, and whenever the face of the Imam would change, inkasara qalbuha, the heart of Layla would break. Ali Akbar begins to fight. As Ali Akbar is fighting, a point it comes that Akbar is surrounded from all sides. As Akbar is surrounded from all sides, Sayyid al-Shuhada begins to get worried. At that moment, Layla says, is our son Akbar in difficulty? The Imam says, oh Layla, my grandfather would say that the dua of a mother in the haqq of her awlad is accepted. You know what Layla does? She raises her hands. She says, Ilahi bi ghurbati Abi Abdullah. Ilahi bi wahdati Abi Abdullah. Ilahi bi atashi Abi Abdullah. Ya Rad Yusuf ila Yaqub. Urdud ilayya waladi Ali. She says, oh Allah, through the right of the ghurba of Hussein. Oh Allah, through the right of the loneliness of Hussein. Oh Allah, through the right of the thirst of Hussein. Oh, the one who returned Yusuf to Yaqub. Return my Ali Akbar. When Ali Akbar he returns, he looks at his father. One line is enough for Masahib. He says, Ya Abate, al-atashu qad qatalani, wa tiqlu al-hadid, qad ajadhani. Then Ali Akbar says, oh my father, the thirst is killing me, and oh my father, this armor has drained my energy, my father. Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi writes something strange in this Masail. You know what Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi writes? He writes that on the day of Siffin, when Muhammad al-Hanafiya returned to Amir al-Mu'mineen took water and he began to pour it on the armor of Muhammad al-Hanafiya. At that point, Muhammad al-Hanafiya said, "Oh father, why are you pouring this water upon my armor?" The Imam says, "Oh Muhammad al-Hanafiya, in the burning sun, this armor of metal, it begins to burn. I say, oh Ali, come towards Karbala. Look at this Hussein." That Ali Akbar says, "Oh my father, is there any water?" The Imam says, "Ya Bunayya, where am I to bring water?" But he says, "Oh Akbar, place your tongue within my mouth." When Akbar places his tongue within the mouth of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Ali Akbar says, "Oh father, your tongue is drier than mine, oh father." The Imam says, "Oh Akbar, your grandfather will give to you from the pool of Kauthar, oh Ali Akbar." Akbar, he bids farewell. He goes to a maqtal. As he goes to the maqtal, a pointed comes. Akbar is surrounded from all sides. Qataluhu irban irba. As Akbar is surrounded, someone strikes Ali Akbar. But that moment it comes, an arrow is fired. That arrow goes to the chest of Akbar. Akbar falls towards the ground. The Imam says, "Ala dunya ba'dak al-afa." Then may this world be nothing after you, O Ali Akbar. That point it comes. A father comes to the body of his son. The Imam places his chest. He places his cheek on the cheek of Ali Akbar. After that, you know what Sayyid al-Shuhada does? Sayyid al-Shuhada sees that there is a broken arrow in the chest of Ali Akbar. You know when Ismail was being slaughtered by Ibrahim, Ismail turned his face away. Ismail said, "Oh father, a father shouldn't have to see his son." In the riwayah it's written that a scratch had come on the neck of Ismail. When Hajra saw that scratch, Hajra fell to the ground. I say, "Oh Hajra, Layla was there in Karbala." Sayyid al-Shuhada, he sits by the body of Ali Akbar. He looks at the chest of Akbar. One hand on the spear, one hand on the chest. He says, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." It's stated at that moment, the Imam, he looks towards Najaf. He says, "Oh Baba, you lifted the door. Oh Baba, you lifted the door of Khaybar. Look at Hussein in Karbala." As he takes the chest, he takes the arrow out of the chest of Ali. Forgive me. I didn't have the energy to recite the Masahib of Ali Akbar. You know, when the head of Ali Akbar was taken to Kufa, and the Christian women saw the head of Ali Akbar, it stated that in front of Layla they said that, "What is the beauty of this young man? That may the mother of this man not see such a day." At that point, Sayyida Zainab says to those women that the mother of Ali Akbar is right here. Don't say this line in front of Layla. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We ask through the right of the Masayib of Ali Akbar that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, help them. Wherever they're sick and ailing, cure them. Ya Allah, we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, Ya Hussein.